In this video, I'm going to be going over everything that we know so far about the face of the franchise mode in Madden 23. Madden 23 is just a little over a month away, and we haven't gotten a ton of info directly from EA Sports themselves, but all throughout July, they're going to be releasing info every week, so make sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon on so you don't miss any of those important videos when I drop them. However, all throughout June, the beta version of the game was out and a lot of people got to play it, so we do know a good bit about face of the franchise based off of that because it was part of the beta during the last couple of weeks. Now, this is a game mode that in my opinion has not been good since it was introduced in Madden 20. Some years it's been better than others, but it's definitely been a mode that's left a lot to be desired. It has also been a mode that has typically had a lot of bugs at launch of each year's game. So with Madden 23, are they going to finally make this mode good? Is it going to get better, or is it going to be more of the same? Let's get into it. Starting off with the positions, one of the areas that is lacked in this mode is that you've not been able to be any position on the field, and that is going to remain the same in Madden 23. They have added a new position, which they've done pretty much each year since the mode has been out. You can now be a cornerback, which is pretty cool, but outside of that, you can also be a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, or a linebacker. So if you're one of those guys that wants to be an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman or even a kicker, that's still not available. The fact is, this mode is definitely not superstar mode, and it seems that they never really intended for it to be that way, as we're in the 4th year of this game mode and you still are limited to the positions you can play, and it doesn't resemble anything like the old superstar mode that we loved. Now, I know there are some people that do like the mode, they like the story aspect, they like the more cutscenes, but I think a lot of people aren't really too crazy about it. Now, when you start off the mode, you create your character for the yard because the yard is interlinked with face of the franchise now, so your initial character is basically your yard character, and then once you create him, you can pick, do you want to go play on the yard, or do you want to start a career mode in face of the franchise? So when you start your career mode in face of the franchise, you will then kind of re-pick your position because the yard positions are a little bit different than the career mode positions, because in the yard, it's a backyard kind of arcade style, so you do play both sides of the ball. So even though you pick your position for the yard when you create your initial character, that doesn't mean you have to be that position when you go into face of the franchise. When you go into face of the franchise, you're going to kind of start from scratch. It's just going to keep your looks and all of that stuff pretty much the same, but you can change your position and you start a fresh story. Now, one small thing that they did change this year that I actually do think is good is that they actually let you pick your difficulty right from the start. So in the previous years, you would basically just start on rookie difficulty and have to play through the story that way, and it was just way too easy to play. It felt like it was impossible to fail or really have any type of a challenge. I do believe there were ways that you could go into the menu afterwards and change the difficulty, but at the beginning they just kind of threw you in on rookie, and it was kind of hard to figure out how to change it. Now it's just up front before you start, what difficulty do you want to play on, which I do think is a small change that is good. Now, the entire premise for face of the franchise this year appears to be just your road to becoming a 99 overall player. That's basically the story. In the previous year's games, the story was a much bigger deal, and although they've pretty much always been pretty corny, outside of the first year, I think the first year the story was okay, but it just wasn't that in-depth. The following year's stories were just really corny, they were really glitchy as well, and it just didn't really provide too much that made you want to actually play through the story, in my opinion. This year, they've kind of stripped a lot of stuff away from this mode. They've stripped a lot of the cutscenes and the story elements away, which some people might like. If you're just a person that likes career mode and you don't want to go through a story and you don't want to sit through a bunch of cutscenes, you kind of just want to hit the field and play, you may like this version of face of the franchise a little bit better. But to me, if you're not making it like superstar mode from years ago, then what is really special about the mode if you completely remove like most of the story elements away? Because it is more of a story mode mixed with a career mode. If you're taking the story element away, but you're also not giving us the entire freedom of a superstar mode from back in the day, what is really the purpose of the mode? But I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. So here's how the story goes. You're a veteran player, I believe, entering your 5th season, and you haven't really been anything special yet. You haven't made an impact. They've taken away the high school portion of the game. They've taken away the college portion portion, the pre-draft stuff where you run the 40 and do your drills, all of that stuff is gone. So again, they've really just stripped so much back from this mode, and those were a couple of things about the mode that at least had some type of value, even though the stories weren't good and there were glitches in some of these past versions of the mode. At least you got to go through high school and go through college, play as some college teams. There was some fun elements to that. They've taken all that away, and they basically just want you to get right into the NFL as fast as possible now. So you basically have an offer from every team, which is kind of weird because if you're not a special player, it's not likely you would have an offer from every team. Now, they are minimal offers. They're not a lot of money because you're basically going into your 5th year and one team is like taking one last chance on you essentially, but you basically just get to pick which team you want to go to. This is their way of saying, hey, you can play for any team you want. Now, I know in NBA 2K, they have something like this as well. Usually if you want to demand a trade, you can pretty much go to any team you want to, because if you're playing a career mode, there's a certain type of person that's just going to want to play for their favorite team and they want to pick where they go. So this is their way of saying, hey, you can pick where you want to go. It just doesn't really quite fit within the story, because if you're not a special player, every single team isn't going to be offering you a contract, even if it is a minimal contract. Now, some teams do offer you a little bit more money. It's all based on the scheme fit and the team need. So if you are a position that a team needs more than another, they might offer you a little bit more money. And of course, you still start with the X Factor. They want you to be an X Factor player, which again doesn't really go with the story, because if you're not a special player and this is your 5th year and you're having your like one last chance to try to prove yourself, you really wouldn't be an X Factor player, but that's just Madden for you. So after you pick your team, there are some cutscenes. There's not a ton of cutscenes. I'll just say that. There's a decent little amount of cutscenes kind of as you're going through the preseason, but once you get to the regular season, it seems to not really have too much in there extra to show you. Like in years past, there at least were some more cutscenes once you were in the NFL, and there was a lot more pre-NFL because it was a much bigger story. Like I said, they've stripped a lot of that away, which again, if you don't like that, maybe you'll like this version better, but I feel like they've taken away everything that was supposed to be kind of special about the mode. Even if it wasn't good in the past, if they could have made those elements better, it could have been a good mode. Now, there are side quests for you to do once you are in the regular season, but I believe this was in the game last year. They may have added a few more, but again, these are really nothing special. So you can kind of plan out your schedule each week. You can do anything from playing a prank on a teammate, which I guess is supposed to build like, team bonding and stuff like that and build the morale. You can do certain training days where you focus on a specific skill, so you can up your speed for the next game or your agility or things like that. They got other activities you can do, like a spa day. You can do a rest day, which helps get your energy back and helps your stamina for the next game. You also have your dedicated practice where you kind of just go in and you do the drills like you would in past games and you get XP for your player for that week. It gets very repetitive though, because you can't even actually see most of these things take place. You do the prank or you do a certain training day. It just simulates all this stuff and gives you the XP, or it gives you the boost for the next game. There's no cutscenes accompanied with this, at least that I saw, and the only thing you actually do is your practice day, which has always been in the game. This gets very repetitive after the first few weeks, and it just feels like you're just clicking buttons and having it simulate. It's not very engaging. Now, I don't know if down the line, once you maybe get to the Super Bowl or the playoffs or things like that, if there's going to be more cutscenes and more things to interact with, but after playing a few weeks into the season, it was just so repetitive that I didn't want to play it anymore, and that's kind of been the problem with the mode. It hasn't been good, and it gets too repetitive, whereas in other games like NBA 2K or even EA's other games themselves, they have much better career modes, and they have just really failed with Face of the Franchise every year, in my opinion, to make it good. And then this year, they stripped everything away from it, so it's even more boring than it's been in the past, and it gets extremely repetitive. Now, this is what I personally think they're doing, because if you kind of look at what they're doing with college football, bringing that back, and you look at their track record with Face of the Franchise, this is the first year since Face of the Franchise has been introduced to the game where they didn't do too much with it. Now, even though the previous versions of the mode weren't good, in my opinion, they had big stories, which does take a lot of time and resources to create those stories, to animate all of those cutscenes and do stuff like that. It does take time and money. They didn't really do much of that this year because there's very limited story and limited cutscenes. The whole premise of the mode is just getting your player to a 99 overall. That's all they want you to do, is just every week slightly increase your XP until you can increase your overall, and then once you hit 99, that is the objective. But they cut back the cutscenes and stuff like that, so they didn't really invest too much into the mode this year like they had in previous years. And what I personally think is going to happen, which makes a ton of sense, is that with college football coming out next year, It's definitely going to have a career mode, probably Road to Glory like it did back in the day. That was a very important mode for this game. Whether they change the name of it, whether they bring it back to Race for the Heisman or whatever they want to call it, you would have your career mode in NCAA and then you would port over to Madden and you would have Superstar mode. Now, because they're building this for college football, it's going to be easy for them to take that and then kind of port that over to Madden to create a Superstar mode like old, where you can be any position, where you had more control over what you did. It might not have as many cutscenes and stuff like that, but most people don't care about that anyway. We just want to actually have a fully fleshed out career mode. So with that game coming back next year, and with this year them not really doing too much different with the mode, instead of adding and putting time into it, they just took a lot of stuff away from it and made very minimal changes. It seems like they're going to try to phase this mode out, which they should, and then phase in Superstar mode next year to launch alongside NCAA football so that you can take your character from NCAA to Madden. I believe that's what they're doing. I think that's what everybody would want, but for this year, it's going to be another lackluster year of Face of the Franchise. Hey, if you want to know about regular franchise mode in Madden 23, check out this video right here on the screen where I broke it down.